Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I am going to give you a very basic working knowledge about Redux Toolkit along with RTK-Query with two very basic projects. So this video is basically created for the beginner level. In this video, our first project will be a very basic blog application using the concept of Redux Toolkit where user can post a blog or he can like or dislike a blog. With the help of this application, you are going to have some basic idea about how to work with Redux Toolkit in a React application. We will be using a starter code for both projects that we are going to build in this video. Using a starter code, we will have an advantage to focus on concept rather than typing unnecessary code. We will write bit less code in this entire video. And don't worry, I will provide the overview of each starter code before we jumping and write any code. Now, once we complete our first project, then we will move on and create another simple to-do app with the help of RTK-Query. In this to-do app, user can add item to the to-do list, user can delete the item, or he can mark the item as complete. So you are going to build a very basic CRUD feature using RTK-Query in a React application. And for this project, I will also provide a starter code which will be available in the video description. So before we move forward and start working on this project, if you like my React Redux video, then please do subscribe my channel and share the channel link with your friend and colleague. Now let's move on and work on our very first project with Redux Toolkit. So for first project, you have to clone this repository and I will provide the link for this repo in the video description. So you have to clone this repository and after that you have to do npm install. Now I will open this GitHub repo in my VS Code. So let's go into the VS Code. So before we move on and write some code, let me give you a brief overview about this starter code. So I have created this project using this Redux plain.js template. So you don't have to do this step. So let's go back to the VS Code. So you can see that I have one app.js file and I have also used here Bootstrap so that we can avoid writing CSS code. So on left hand side we have a blog form. From that we can publish our blog, and on right hand side I am rendering the blog list which is submitted by this blog form. So at the moment we just have a heading, and if I go back to the browser, so you can see that we have on left hand side we have a blog form and right hand side we have a blog list in which I am going to render all the blogs. Now let's go back to VS Code again, and here we have index.js file and we have an app and feature. So in app we have a store configuration. So at the moment we don't have any reducer, so this is empty, and we have a features folder in which I have one blogs folder in which I have form and blog list. Okay, so this is a very basic form which I have written here so that the user can publish the blog. So here I have just provided you the source code of this all different file so that we can more focus on learning the Redux Toolkit concept. So here we have a very basic form. So we have one drop down for selecting user, we have an input field for title, and we have a body for our blog. Now we have a blog list as well. Okay, so at the moment I am rendering the two blogs from this component itself. Okay, and here we have a blog user as well. So we are also going to show this blog is created by which user. Okay, at the moment it is just plain. Okay, and we have a response button. So here basically you can like or unlike the blog. So this is a very basic component. Now let's go back to this index.js file. So here basically we are providing the store to our app so that our component can access the state which we are going to define in our store. And earlier I have already informed you that in this project I am going to use a Bootstrap version 5. So I have already pasted the CDN for the Bootstrap version 5 so that we can avoid writing CSS code in this project. And now let's talk about this package.json file as well. So here we have got this Redux toolkit and React Redux, which is important to work with the Redux toolkit in a React application. So I have already got this two dependency whenever you set up a React project with this command. So whenever you create any React project with this command, so you are going to get this two dependency along with that, that is React Redux and Redux toolkit. So this is all about the overview of this blog starter project. Now let's start working on this simple blog application. So first I am going to create a slice here. So that will be like blogs slice.js, and I'm going to import a create slice from Redux toolkit. So slice basically is used to define our initial state and action and reducer. So for that purpose we are creating a slice. So create slice we need to bring. After that what we need to do, so here we have to define a block slice. Okay, and here we can use this create slice which gonna be object, and we have to define a slice name. I'm going to give a slice name here block, and we are going to have initial state. Okay, so let me define a initial state here only. So from this blog list.js file I'm just going to cut this one. Okay, and I'm just going to paste it over here. Let me rename to initial state. Okay, so we got our initial state. Now we are gonna having a reducer in which we are going to write an action. So at the moment let it be empty, and let me export this one. So export default blog slice dot reducer. So we are exporting this reducer, and we are going to hook up this reducer in our store.js file. Okay, so let me go back to this app folder, and here I'm going to bring that block reducer. So block reducer, and here we have to go to this feature folder and blocks, and we have to use this file. Now we can hook up our reducer in this reducer object. So blocks, we can give any key whatever you want. So I am giving over blocks, and we can just assign blocks reducer. So let's save this file, and here everything is fine, I guess. Okay, now let's go to this blog list.js file. So here first I'm going to bring a use selector from React Redux, because we need to select the state that we have defined in this block slice. So for that purpose we need, so let's bring here use selector, and then we can have our blog. So const blocks is equal to use selector, and here we can access our all block from this state dot blocks, because our reducer is registered with the key blocks here. Okay, so now we got our all blocks. Okay, and we are using this render block function to render all the block. So we have id, title, content, okay, blog user. So at the moment we don't have any basically user. Okay, in this slice you can see that. So it's gonna just render the unknown user. Okay, so we will write the logic for user later in this project. So first let's focus on rendering the block in our application. So we got this block from our store and we are rendering the block using this function. So let's go to this app.js file and remove this hard-coded heading, and I'm going to bring the blog list component. Okay, so let me save this file and let's go into the browser. So now here you can see that we got our two blocks that we have defined in this block slice.js file. Okay, so we got this two initial block. So this part is completed, where we have learned how to select the state from the store. So this part is over now. Now before we move forward and use this component, we need to talk about this use selector, because right now it received the state and then we got state dot block. But if structure of our state change, like right now this component should know something about state. It need to know we go state dot block. It could be state dot block dot something else in the future. So it would be better if we create a selector in the slice and then export it, and that way if the shape of state ever change in future, we wouldn't have to go through and change each component. We could change once in the slice. So let's do that in our block slice.js file. So here we are going to create a selector. So I'm going to export that one first. So export const select all blocks, and we are going to have an anonymous function which is going to receive a state, and this will be state dot blocks. Okay, now we can bring this selector in this block list.js file. So let me bring that one. So from block slice we need to bring that select all blocks, and here we can just pass select all blocks. Okay, so let's save this file and let's head over to the browser. So this is still working with that approach. So the selector part is also completed in this application. Now let's move forward and create a reducer function for adding the block in our application. So I'm going to add an action here inside this reducer object. So we are going to have a add block. Okay, and it's gonna having a like state and action, and we can do something like this: state dot push and action dot payload. So here action dot payload basically contain the information about our blog, which basically contain title, body and user ID. So this is our action which we have brought in our reducer object. Now we will talk about this state.push in a second, because if you are familiar enough with the React, you know we don't usually mutate state, and that what dot push would do in an array. So we will talk in a moment. So let me first export this function. So export const, and we're gonna having a block slice dot action. So here create slice basically generate an action created with the same name which we have defined over here, that is add block. So it's gonna automatically generate the action creator. Now let's talk about this state dot push that we have written over here. So we generally used to writing state like spreading the state, and then we have an action payload as a new item instead of state.push. But Redux Toolkit use immer.js under the hood, and that allow you to write your JavaScript like this, where you would normally be mutating the state, but it is not mutating the state. Immer.js create new state underneath. Now we realize this only work inside of create slice. Anywhere else in your application, you still need to use proper way of not mutating the state. However, inside create slice, you can use state.push, and you can directly set the state in other way as well, and immer.js will handle that. So it make it easier to handle inside of here. So let's move forward and use this action in our form component. So let's go to this add block form.js file, and we are going to use this action that we have just created now in our block slice. So we have already a basic form over here, you can see that, and for now I'm just going to comment this drop down. Let's just focus on publishing the blog with title and body. So we have one on submit in which we have just e.prevent default. We have this handle change for basically tracking the state of each field, that is we have over here like input and text area, and we are going to write a logic to submit the blog in this on submit only. So first we need to bring a use dispatch. Okay, so we need to bring a use dispatch from React Redux in order to dispatch an action. So use dispatch, and first we have to store the reference of use dispatch into a dispatch variable. So we have to just store the reference of this use dispatch into this dispatch variable so that we can dispatch an action. Now here what we have to do first, so here I'm just going to check like if we have the title and body, then we are going to basically dispatch. So dispatch, and we have to also bring the action. So let's bring the action as well from our block slice. So add block, I have bring over here, and we can dispatch here like add block, and here we have to first provide the ID. So I'm going to use a nano ID from Redux Toolkit. So from Redux Toolkit we need basically a unique ID. So for that purpose I need to bring a nano ID from Redux Toolkit, so that every block should contain a unique ID. So here we can use nano ID, and that will be with parenthesis. And now we can send title and body. After that, we wanted to basically clear the each input field, that is title and body. So set form. So let's make it empty. This title input field and body text area after submitting the blog. So let's check whether it's working or not. So let's go into the browser. And here I have forgot to bring the component in our app.js file. So let me bring the component. So add blog form. Now let's go into the browser. So there is some issue with the styling. So let me see what is going on. So we need to add few styling in our index.css file. So I'm just going to paste those styling. So this basic styling we have to add in our index.css file. And don't worry, this styling will always present in your starter code. So you don't have to worry about that part. So let's save this one and let's go into the browser. So now it's look good. Okay. Let me refresh the application. So it's looking good. Now we have to publish our first blog by dispatching this action that we have defined here, okay, in our on submit. So let's see whether it's working or not. So let me just give here like test, okay, and let me give here what's going on, and let's click on submit. So we got some issue. Let me see. Okay, so let me see what's going on. So here it will be body, not content. So make sure to change this one from content to body. Now let's go into the browser and refresh this application. So we are still getting the issue. So it will be like body, not content. Okay. So let's save this one and let's go into the browser. Now we got our two posts. Okay. Let me close this one. So let's publish our blog with the action that we have just created in our blog slice. So let's give it test, and let's click on submit. So you can see that this is working. So we have successfully able to add a simple blog with our action that we have just created with the help of Redux Toolkit. Now our form is working perfectly, but it could be better. So let's talk about that, because right now it needs to know the detail about the state once again. In order to send it properly, it has to send a properly formatted object, and it will be better if we could abstract some of that. We don't want to duplicate this type of logic in every component that goes to our global state. So instead, we can handle this back in our slice with a prepare callback. And prepare callback can generate unique ID, format the data, return the object with payload, and that basically kind of what we are doing here. So this will really simplify our component, and it will handle everything once again back in the slice. So let's go to the slice. So here we have to modify our add blog. So what we can do over here. So let me just cut this one, and here we are going to have a reducer, okay, and we are going to have again the same thing, that is state and action, and we can just do like state dot push with action payload. So action dot payload. Now here we can define our prepare callback. So prepare. Now we can pass the title and body, and then we can return a formatted object. Okay, so return, and it's gonna return with the payload. So payload, and again we are going to have id here. So again we need to bring here nano id. So let's bring a nano id from Redux toolkit. Then we can have our title and body. Okay, so what we are missing something over here. So I think put comma and something we are missing. So let me check. So here we have to remove, I guess, this two thing. Okay, and for return we have to use this semicolon, and I think for this is fine. Let me check. Okay, this is also look good, and here we have to add one more. Okay, so let me format this one. So now it's fine, you can see that. So here we pass the title and body that we would get from the component, and then it returned the action payload as it need to be formatted. So we have returned over here, and then we have a payload where we define id with nano id along with title and body. So we have modified our slice with the prepare callback. Now we have to also adjust few things in our block form. So from here we can remove this object, and we can just pass title and body, and the rest of the thing will handle in our slice with this prepare callback which we have just defined over here. Okay, so let's go back to this form, and the benefit here is that our component once again doesn't even have to know the structure of state at all. Now everything is handled inside of the slice, and we can just send the raw data that we need to. So let's try this one in our browser. So I'm going back to my browser again. So let's refresh this application, and let's give some title, test and test, and hit submit. So now you can see that this is working. So with this prepare callback, we are successfully able to publish our blog. So this part is completed here. So we basically simplify our code little bit in our slice. So now we are done with this, and we can remove this one. We don't need nano id here because we no longer need the id for creating blog, because everything is handled inside our slice. So let's get rid of this. Now before we move forward and work on the user part, where we are going to select a user from the drop down, let's just talk about the Redux dev tool. So let me go back to the browser, and let's refresh this application first, and I'm going to open a Redux dev tool. So you can install the Redux dev tool extension in your browser. So I'm going to open to my right. Okay, so let me just refresh this application. So here you can see that the state of our application. So we got this two block in our initial state, and you can see the state in a different format like chart. You can see in the chart, and you can also see in the raw format. So you have a different format to view the state of our application. So Redux Dev tool basically is used to track the application state, and also you can track the action that you are going to dispatch. So let's try to add one block. Okay, again, so I'm just going to give you a test again, test, and let's see our Redux Dev tool. So now you can see that we have dispatched our add block action. So in the Redux Dev tool, you can also track the action dispatch. So we got this action, okay, and now we got 3 blog in our application. So you can see this blog is added. So you can see that this newly blog is added in our store, and you can also calculate the difference here. Okay, so this newly blog is added in our store, and this is action that we have just dispatched by hitting the submit button. So this is all about the basic overview of Redux Dev tool and how to use this Redux Dev tool whenever you are using Redux in a React application. Now I'm going to minimize this one. Now I'm going to start working on the user part in this application so that user can able to select the user from the drop down while submitting the blog. So I'm going to have one more folder inside this features. So I'm going to have a folder like users, and we are going to have a user slice. So user slice.js, and again I need to bring create slice from Redux Toolkit. So let's bring from Redux Toolkit create slice, and then I'm just going to paste the initial state. So we are going to have some default user so that you can select from the user drop down. Now after that we're gonna have a user slice. So user slice create slice name. So we are going to provide the slice name. So it will be users, and we can pass here initial state, and the reducer will be the empty object. Now again I'm going to create a selector here for the user. So export const select all users. We're gonna having an anonymous function, so it will be state and state dot users, and then we can export our slice. So export default users slice dot reducer, and then we can hook up this reducer in our store. So let's go to this store.js file, and I can just copy this one, this import statement, and this will be user, and it will be coming from user slice. So we need to change the entire path. So it will be coming from users folder and then users slice, and here it will be users and users reducer. So we are done with the user slice in this application. Now let's go back to this block form. So here we need to bring all the users. So first we need to bring use selector as well, and here we can have our all user. Okay, and we can bring the selector that we have just defined in this slice. So let's bring this select all user. So VS Code is going to automatically import for me. Okay, it's not importing in your case, so you have to import it manually. Now we got all the users. Okay, and we can just uncomment this line of code. And here what we have to do, so let's have a users option. We got all the users and we can map over it user, and we're gonna having an option, so key will be like user.id, and we can give here a value user.id only, and then inside this user.name. So let's use this user option here in the drop down. So here we can have this users option. So let's see whether we are able to see the user or not in the drop down. So let's go back to the browser, and here we got our 3 users that we have defined in our user slice, that is John Doe, Nancy and James Bond. So this part is done, but still we have to do some modification as well before we publish our new blog with this latest changes. So what changes we have to do over here, so let's understand that one. So while adding the blog, we are also going to pass the user. Okay, so here what we are going to do, so you can see that for drop down we are using here handle user. So handle user basically is going to store the user. Okay, it's going to store the user id, as you can see that here in handle user function. Let's pass here user id as well, because in initial state we have defined 3 things like title, body and user id for our blog form. So we are passing this user id, and since we have modified this action part while dispatching this add blog, so we have added one more argument, that is user id, like which user is basically publishing the blog. So we have to also modify our prepare callback function that we have defined in the blog slice. So let's go to into that file. So let me go back to that file, that is blog slice. So now it's going to receive the user id. Okay, so user id is going to receive, and it will be user id. Okay, so we have modified our prepare callback. Now we have to also do some changes in our blog user component. Okay, so at the moment it's just showing the unknown user, we are not displaying the username. Okay, so before we do that, let's go back to this blog list.js file, and here you can see that we are passing the user id. So we are mapping each blog that we are receiving from our store, and we are passing the user id here, okay, to this blog user component. So we can mention this user id here. Okay, and after that what we have to do, so we need to bring first use selector from React Redux, because we need to find which user is basically publishing the blog. So we need first all the users that we have in our user slice. So use selector first we need to bring, and then we need first of all the users. So use selector, and we can pass here the selector that we have defined in the user slice. So select all users. So VS Code automatically import for me, and then after that we can write a basic logic here. So we need to find that particular user. So we can use here all the users, like users dot find
and we are going to have each user, and we are already receiving the user ID from our blog list component. So it will be like user.id, and if the ID is match, then we are going to grab that user and we are going to show the name. So what we have to do over here, so let's remove this one and first check if we have the user, then user dot name, else it will be unknown user. Okay, so let's save this file and let's go to this add block form.js file as well. And here I'm also going to empty the drop down field as well. So user ID, and it will be empty after submitting the blog. And before we publish a blog with all these changes, I wanted to make the submit button disable until all the field get filled by the user. So what I can do, so I can have one on is filled. So it's going to check whether each input field has some value or not. So we can use here boolean. So title boolean, so it will be body and boolean, so it will be user ID. So this button will be disabled if any input field left empty. So we can just check this one. Okay, so let's see whether it's working or not. So we need to go back to the browser, refresh this one, and I'm going to select a user here, John Doe. Let's give a title test, let's give a body test. Now you can see that this button got enabled after submitting the value in each input field. So let's click on submit. So now you can see that this time we got the username as well, that is John Doe. Okay, so this part is also completed over here, and you can see that we have successfully able to publish a blog with the username as well. So we are done here with selecting the user and publish the blog with the specific user name. So let's move forward and work on the rest of the functionality that we have in this application. Like we have to also implement the functionality like and dislike. So whenever user click on like or dislike button, it is going to increase. So let's work on that feature as well with Redux Toolkit. So we need to write a reducer function for that. And before we write a reducer function, let's modify prepare callback again. So you can see that in initial state we have a response object with like and unlike. So we are going to have the same thing in the prepare callback as well. So first let's give here response. Okay, and it will be like, so initially it will be 0, so all the count will be 0 for now whenever a user created a blog. So let's save this one. So now let us start writing a reducer function for liking or disliking the post. So I'm going to have here response added one reducer function which is responsible for liking or disliking the post. So it's gonna having a state and action, and from action.payload we are going to receive two things whenever a user dispatch an action while liking or disliking the post. So it's going to receive like blog ID and the response. So you can see that this component, so here we have a name and emoji. So I have used over here like object.entry because this is a object and we are mapping over it. So this name is key and emoji is value. So we are going to pass two things, that is which blog we are basically liking and the emoji. So we will work later on this component. So first let's work on this reducer function. So from action.payload we are going to receive two things, that is blog id and response, and we have to check existing blog. So state, so in state we have got our all blog, so state dot find, and we are going to have blog, and first we have to basically match the blog, like which blog we are basically liking or disliking. So first we have to grab that particular blog, and here we can give this blog id. So if we have the existing blog, then existing blog dot response, and here response, and here basically we are going to increment. Okay, what we have to do next thing, so we need to bring first use dispatch from React Redux. So use dispatch, and here we need to first store the reference of use dispatch into a dispatch variable, and this component is also going to receive a blog, okay, from our blog list. Okay, so you can see that at the moment we are not passing anything, so let's pass here blog, and we can just pass this particular blog. Okay, now this response button component is receiving the particular blog, and here what we can do, so on click we can basically dispatch an action. So dispatch, and we can bring the action. So we have created the action, but I guess we haven't export, so let's export this one. Okay, now let's go back to this response button.js, and here first we need to bring that one. So we need to bring that function, reducer function. So from block slice we have to bring response added, and then we can dispatch this response added. So we have to pass two things, that is first blog id. So we are already getting from this blog props, so blog.id, and response, so it will be name only, and we have to also show the count. So let's do that one. So blog dot response, and we can pass here name. So let's go into the browser and see whether it's working or not. So first refresh this one. So now you can see that initially we got the count 0. Okay, and if you click on this one, so it's not incrementing. So let me see what's going on. So we are able to dispatch an action or not. First let's see that one. So action is not dispatching at all. So actually we have write this reducer function outside this reducer object. Okay, so it's closing here, so we need to write here actually. Okay, so let's cut this one and paste it over here. Refresh this one first. So this is working. Okay, as you can see that this is getting incremented. Let's add one block here with Nancy. Let's give here test. Let's give here, let's just copy this one. Let's submit and let's see whether we are able to like or not this newly created blog. So this is also working. You can see that our like functionality is also working in this application with the help of Redux toolkit. So it seems like everything is working in this simple blog application. So I think that's it from this section. We have implemented all the features that we have discussed in the intro part of this section. So we have implemented the feature like how to add block, like or dislike a particular block. So all this feature we have implemented with the help of Redux Toolkit in a React application. And I hope this is a very good exercise for you in terms of understanding the basic concept of Redux Toolkit with React.
Now let's move on and start working on our final project with RTK-Query.
Now let's understand what is RTK-Query. So RTK-Query is a powerful data fetching and a caching tool. So it is mainly used for fetching the data from server and it's cache the data for future use. And here it is also mentioned that it is designed to simplify common cases for loading data in web application, eliminating the needs to hand write data fetching and caching logic yourself. So here we don't have to write logic manually for loading, fetching or error part whenever we have to make a API request. So generally what happen, RTK query will take care all of this task behind the scene. So overall RTK query provide a powerful tool set to define a API interface layer for our application. And you don't have to install an additional package to work with the RTK query because RTK query is built on the top of the other API in the Redux Toolkit package. So you don't have to install RTK query additionally in your application. Now let's see what API include inside this RTK query. So first we have a create API. So create API is the core of the RTK query functionality. It allows you to define a set of endpoints, describe how to retrieve a data from a series of endpoints, including configuration of how to fetch and transform that data. And in most cases, we should use this once per app. So overall in create API, we define a different endpoint. You can call series of endpoint. So this is all about the create API. Now let's talk about the fetch based query. So fetch based query is a small wrapper around fetch to simplify request. So inside this fetch based query, we define base URL for our API. Now let's talk about the API provider. So API provider can be used as a provider if you don't have a Redux store. So if you don't have a store in your application, so you can use this API provider. Now let's talk about the last one, that is setup listener. So it is a utility used to enable refetch on amount and refetch on reconnect behavior. So this is all about the RTK query. So to start working on this project, first you have to basically download this repository, or you can make it clone, and I will give the GitHub link of this repo in the description, so you don't have to worry on that part. So first you have to make it clone or download this repository. After that you have to open this repository in your VS Code, and don't worry, I'm going to give you the brief overview about this project. So I have written some basic React code to avoid writing much React code in the video. So our focus is learning the basic of RTK query. So we will be more writing code on that part. So I hope now you have downloaded this repo or you have make it clone. So I'm going to open this project in my Visual Studio Code. So let's go to the VS Code. So this is todos starter project that I'm going to use. So I will give you a brief overview about this starter project that we are going to use in this section. So let's first have a look into our package.json file. So here we just have like React DOM and this basic thing. So this basic thing got generated with the command npx create react app and your project name. Now you can also notice that we have got one db.json file. So in this project we are going to use a JSON server. So that's why I have this db.json file. And to run JSON server, I have added a script in my package.json file. So you can see that I have added a script here. So our JSON server is going to listen on port 5000. And if you haven't installed the JSON server, so you have to install the JSON server first in order to start working with this JSON server in this React project. So you can install JSON server like npm install JSON server -g. So you have to install the JSON server globally on your machine. Now let's see what we have in this starter project. So we have this app.js file, and I have already write some React code in order to save some time. So at the moment you can see in my browser that we have got two to-dos, okay, and these are basically hard coded. So if I go back to my VS Code, so at the moment we are showing those two to-dos hard coded, okay, and once we integrate RTK-Query in this project, then we are going to show to-do or dynamically. So at the moment these things are basically hard coded, and we have got some basic styling for this React code. So we have got some styling in our app.css file. So you don't have to worry about all the styling. I have already provided in this starter project. So we have this some styling, and we are going to write our all code for to-dos in this app.js file. So at the moment you cannot add, delete or update the to-dos. So we will write RTK query endpoint to interact with this API. So in order to work with RTK query, first we have to install two packages, okay. So let's install those two packages, that is Redux-JS Toolkit and React Redux. So I'm going to open a terminal here, and I'm going to install a package here like Redux-JS Toolkit and React Redux. So these two packages need to install in order to work with RTK query. So let's wait for the package installation. And meanwhile, I will basically run the JSON server as well. So I'm going into my directory. So here I'm going to open one more command prompt, and I will do like npm run server. Okay, so let's go back to browser. So here we have got our to-dos that we have mentioned inside this db.json file. So you can see that in db.json file we got 3 to-dos, okay, and you can see that our package is also got installed. So I'm going to close this terminal, okay. So here we have already got some basic setup to start working with our very first RTK query project, that is to-dos app. Now we are going to integrate RTK query in this project. So we are going to have one folder here under the source, that is feature, and inside feature we are going to have one folder called API, and inside this API folder we are going to have apiSlice file. So apiSlice.js. Inside this apiSlice, this is where we will create our method to interact with API. So essentially we are replacing something like Axios and pull that code out of our component logic in this separate API slice. And this is the kind of how we name thing in Redux if you have watched my previous project with Redux Toolkit in this course. So I'm going to bring two things from Redux Toolkit. So we have to give this path Redux Toolkit, and the path will be query and React. So from this path we have to import two things. So I'm going to import create API for creating a different API to interact with it, and fetch based query. Now after that I'm going to export this API slice. So export const API slice and create API, and this is gonna be having an object, and inside this I'm going to have like reducer path, and you can give here name like API. So this reducer path is default, and if you don't put here then it will okay, but I'm going to include this one as well. After that I'm going to define base query, and inside that we are going to have fetch base query, and here we have to provide base URL. So we have to specify this URL, this JSON server URL, and I'm just going to remove this todos. Okay, so you might have noticed that this is something similar to Access, because in Access also we provide base URL. So this is something similar to Access only. After that we are going to have endpoint for API to interact with it. So we are going to write here a builder pattern, okay, to interact with API. So let me write our first query here. So our first method will be like get todos, okay, and builder dot query, and here we are going to have a query, and we can have this arrow function, and here I am going to specify the path, that is todos, which is going to attach with this base URL. So this method basically is responsible for fetching all the to-dos that we have in our JSON server. Okay, so let's format this one, and this RTK query is going to basically expose a custom hook. So let's see how it's look like. So export on and API slice. Now this RTK query is going to expose a custom hook based on this method. So use get todos query. So based on the method name that you have provided under this endpoint, so it's going to expose hook like this use get todos query. So whatever the name you have given here inside this endpoint, the RTK query is going to expose the hook based on this name. So suppose if you change this get todos to fetch todos, so this will get changed. Okay, so whatever the method you are going to define inside this endpoint, it's going to expose the custom hook based on that. So I'm just going to reward this one. So let's reward this one. So our first RTK query is ready. Okay, so before we use this custom hook in our component, we have to do some adjustment in our index.js file. So let's go to this index.js file, and here we have to bring API provider. Okay, so from this path we have to bring API provider. And here we can bring that API provider. So this slice basically we need to provide to our entire app component. So we need here API provider, and we are not using here store. So that's the reason I am using here API provider. Okay. Now we have to also bring this API slice as well. So API slice, you can see we have bring this API slice from this path. Now we have to wrap this our app component with API provider. Let's cut this one and paste it over here. Okay. And here we can pass our API slice like this way. Okay. Now by doing this way, we can use this custom hook in our component. Okay. So we have successfully integrated our RTK query in this project, and we have also write one query to fetch all the to-dos from our JSON fake server. So now we have got our one query to fetch to-do from our JSON server. So let's use this query in our component. So what I'm going to do over here, so const going to use this use get to-dos query. So make sure to bring this use get to-dos query. So make sure to bring this use get to-dos query from this path. And in my case, VS Code automatically import this one. So in your case, may it's not import automatically. So make sure to bring this custom hook from this path. Now this use get to do query is going to expose some properties. So going to export like is going to expose like data, and if you just do like control space, so you are going to see a lot of property that this custom hook generating. So we are not going to use all of this property. So I'm going to use here like is loading and is success, is error and error. So as you can see that by using this RTK query custom hook, it reduce a lot of Redux boilerplate code. Okay, so we don't have to define a separate state for is loading, success, error or is error. So that's why RTK query is preferred nowadays. So let's use this one, and we can also rename any property if you wanted. So I'm going to rename this data to to-dos. Okay, so you can also rename this one. Now after this I am going to define one variable. Okay, so let content, and here I'm going to use this like is loading first. So if there is loading, so I'm just going to give here like content, and I'm going to use here p tag. You can just give here simple loading with 3 dot. Else if is success, that means we have got our data from our JSON server. So in that case we can show our all to do that we have in our db.json file. So content is equal to, and I'm going to use here like to do's dot map, and here I am going to use to do, and let's use here return. I'm going to use here fragment, and I'm just going to cut this piece of code. Okay, so let's cut this one, and I'm going to paste it here. So at the moment everything was hard coded, so I'm just going to remove this one. Okay, one list item I'm going to remove, and here I can give like to do dot title. So you can see that in db.json we have a title. Okay, now just save this one, and we are also going to have one more else if. So else if, and if there is any kind of error, so we can just simply show that error in a p tag. And let's use this content here below this div. Okay, so let's use content here, and let's save this file, and let's go into the browser. So now you can see that we are displaying all the to-dos that we have in our db.json file. At the moment it's showing like all to-dos got completed. So let's put a check here in app.js file. So we have to use here template literal in order to apply that. So here we have to change this one. So if to do dot completed, then I'm going to use here a styling class name that is checked, else it will be empty string. So now let's go back to browser. So now you can see that it's working. So only this to do is got completed as per our db.json file. So we have successfully able to fetch the data using our very first RTK query in this application. Now next thing, I wanted to apply mutation in this to-dos app. So I'm going to write mutation here inside our endpoint for adding, updating or deleting the to-dos. So here what we can do, so I'm going to write a one method here like add to do, and builder dot mutation. So this time we are basically adding a new to do, so we are writing here mutation. So this is difference here. Okay, so query is used for fetching the data, and mutation, that means we are doing some changes in our db.json file, whether we are adding new to do or updating a to do or deleting existing to do. So all these things come under the mutation. So here we have to mention mutation, and inside this again we are going to have object, and again we are going to use here query, and for adding the to do we are going to receive a new to do from our component. So here we have to specify here to do, and then here we have to provide URL. So this time we are specifying the URL, but here we have simply passed the URL in this arrow function. So this is the same thing. Here we are just dealing with fetching the data from our db.json file, but here we have to pass some more parameter. That's why we have to go with this way. And here again we can mention this path, that is to do's, and here we are gonna specify method as well. So we are making here post request, and in the body, so we have to also specify body. In the body we are going to pass our new to do. So This way it's gonna add our new to do in our JSON server. Now let's save this one, and you will notice that this time it's going to expose a different custom hook based on this method. So it's gonna expose use add to do mutation, because we are updating the data in our this db.json file. Now I'm going to write mutation for updating the to-dos as well. So I am just going to copy this one, and I'm going to just change this method to update to do, but this time URL is going to change here, because we have to update the to do specific to dos based on the ID. So I'm going to use here template literal. So let's use that one. So to do dot id, and here you can use method like patch or put. So patch basically is used for updating the RCL information, and put basically is used for updating the entire record. So you can use either patch or put. And in the body, again, we are going to provide this to do for updating the specific to do. Now this will again expose a new hook based on this method, that is use update to do mutation. Now I'm going to write one more mutation for deleting the to do. So delete to do builder dot mutation. Okay, and here I can just copy this one. Okay, and this time we are going to receive just ID from our component. So we can destructure ID like this way, and here we have to just delete the to do based on the ID. We can just pass here like ID, and the method will be delete, and in the body we have to just provide ID. Okay, now let's save this one and expose a custom hook for our delete to do as well. So use delete to do mutation. So we have write our mutation for adding the to do, updating the to do, and deleting the to do. Now I'm going to use all this mutation in our component. So let's go over to the top, and here I'm going to bring, that is add to do mutation. Then I'm going to bring use add update to do mutation, and use delete to do mutation. Okay, and here we are not going to expose this property like this way that we have done for this use get to do query, because we are updating the things in this db.json file. So whatever the method we have defined here, like add to do, update to do, and delete to do, we are just going to use them. Okay, so here we can just do like this way, add to do, because this method we have defined inside our apiSlice.js file, and this will be update to do, and this will be delete to do. Okay, so let's format this one, and first I'm going to add our very first to do. Okay, so here we can use that add to do, and we can pass here like title, and we can pass here this to do. So you can see that we have defined a local state for capturing the to do. So you can see that in this input field we are setting this to do, and we are just passing that to do in this add to do. I hope you are getting this. and by default I am making this completed to false. Okay, now let's use this other two method as well. So for deleting, we can use here one on click method. So on click, we can use here delete to do, and we can pass id. So to do dot id. Let's format this one, and for update the to do, so we can pass here one more on click method, and here we can use our update to do. So here we are spreading out our to do, and we are just updating the completed. Okay, so here we are just doing the opposite. So if it's true, then it will become false. If it's false, then it will become true. Let's format this one. Okay, and let's save this file. Now it's time to go back to browser and see whether it's working or not. So let's go back to browser. I'm going to just refresh this application. Okay, so I'm just going to give one to do here, like eating apple. Let's click on add. So you can see that here our to do is not getting added in the to do list. And if you try to click this one in order to mark completed, so this is also not working. And if I click to delete, so this is also not working. So let's understand why this is not working. So let's understand the situation here, why it's not working after applying mutation. So we have to head back to our API slice. So what is happening over here, like our result got cached and we are not invalidating previous cache. So that's the reason it's not showing our new changes in our app. So if you refresh this application, then you will able to see the latest changes. Okay, so you can see that we have added this eating apple, and we have marked this first to do to complete, and we have deleted one to do as well from our to do list. So you can see that after refreshing the application, it is working as expected, but it's not showing our changes on the spot by adding to do or updating to do or deleting the to do. So our result got cached, but we are not invalidating the previous cache. So this is the reason it's not showing our new changes. So what we have to do over here, so here we have to specify tag types. Okay, and here we are going to give to do's. Okay, and inside this get to do's, we have to mention like provides tags. Okay, like this way. After this, what we have to do, so we have to invalidate the to do cache to this builder mutation. So here we can give like invalidate tags. So by doing this, it will basically automatically refetch data for us. So here again we can mention this to do's. Okay, and we can apply this invalidate tag to all mutation. Okay, so we have applied this invalidate tag to other two mutation as well. Now we can save this file and we can go back to our app again and just refresh this one. Okay, so I'm going to add one more to do here, like sleeping. So you can see that now we are able to see our changes without refreshing the application. So now you can see that we are able to see our added to do at the bottom, and this time we didn't refresh our app. And if you click on this any to do, so it will mark as completed. So you can see that this is also working, and you can also perform the delete operation as well. So by clicking on this X mark, so it's going to delete from our to-do list. Okay, and you have also noticed that here for partial time it's showing loading. So you might not able to see the loading. So we can see that loading by making a delay. Okay, so we can use here like slow 3z. Okay, and then you will able to see the loading as well. So you can see that we are able to see the loading. So let's reward this one. Okay, so we have performed all the basic RTK query operation on this to-do list. So this to-do app is almost completed, and you have noticed one thing, like whenever we add new to-do, so let's add one more to-do here, like waking. Okay, waking up. So whenever we add new to do, it's adding at the bottom, but we wanted this to do at the top whenever we add new to do in our to do list. So let's see how we can achieve that one with RTK query. So to achieve that one, we need to basically transform our response. So we can use here like transform response, and we got our response, and here we can write a basic sort method. Okay, and we can pass one callback method to basically sort our data. So b.id minus a.id. So this way you can also basically transform your response. So let's save this one, and let's go into the browser. So you can see that already this waking up got moved to the top, and if you add new to do like having lunch, something like this, and if you click on add, so it's going to add, okay, at the top. So you have also saw like how you can transform the response. So I hope now you have got some basic understanding about how to work with RTK query in a React application.
I hope guys you have learned some very important concept around Redux Toolkit and RTK-Query with these two projects. So that's it from this video. I will see you in some other interesting video. Till then, goodbye and take care.